We can't hear you, even though your mute button isn't shown.
Press all day.
How about that?
There we are. That's better.
You can hear me now?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, I just unplugged my headphones. Okay, so start again. Today we welcome Bradford Boyd Kennedy. He was born in Omaha, Nebraska in 1948, and he grew up immersed in the middle-class milieu of white privilege until the summer of 1962, when his father was transferred by his company, the Mutual of Omaha, to Little Rock, Arkansas. There he was plunged into a very different, largely conservative, race-conscious society, which was extremely sensitive about relations between Blacks and whites. Although he attended a different high school, the memory of the integration of Little Rock Central High School was very much alive among the almost completely white student body at his high school, and that experience had an intense effect on his teenage years. After graduating from high school in 1967, he attended college in Massachusetts, where he was exposed to the liberal, peace-focused, anti-Vietnam War, back to the land hippie counterculture of that era. During these years, he was also influenced by people who were strongly committed members of a local Quaker meeting. After much reflection, he applied for and was granted conscientious objector status by his draft board, and after he graduated, he began the required 2 years of alternative service. The end of his service obligation was the beginning of his preparing for and entering the teaching profession. He taught high school mostly in Alabama and Kentucky for 27 years. And then in 2005, his wife got a job at the University of Missouri and they moved here. He stopped teaching at that time and held a number of other positions until he finally retired from a staff position at MU in 2018. The very next year, he discovered the work of Brian Stevenson and the Equal Justice Initiative, EJI, which is located in Montgomery, Alabama. EJI is the organization which has birthed many community remembrance projects, or CRPs, throughout the United States, one of which is our Boone County CRP. And I know very little about this, so I'm really looking forward to hearing more about it today. So thank you for joining us, and I will hand over to you.
Thank you. Thank you all for inviting me. Excuse me, I'm honored to be here. I want to acknowledge some longtime friends, Sue and Herb and the Scalas, Mary Jo and Al, and hope I'm not missing anybody else. Especially want to thank Commissioner Thompson and all the other Boone County commissioners, as well as the Columbia City Council, who have all been very supportive throughout our organization's work. We should want to also mention the county councilor CJ Dykehouse, who held our hands and piloted us through all the required steps to get some public memorials underway. So anyway, very, very grateful to all of you, and okay, I guess I should start. Some of what I had decided to say will be repetitive because of I didn't realize my entire introduction was going to be read. But anyway, I should say, first of all, I guess that probably my title needs some elaboration. I will be speaking about kind of a specific brand of progressive advocacy and activism. That brand is practiced by, among other groups, the Equal Justice Initiative, EJI, which was founded in 1989 by Brian Stevenson, headquartered in Montgomery, Alabama. They have an incredible museum and facility there, which I haven't had the opportunity to see. I don't know if any of you have, but it is really worth the trip. Their website, which is eji.org, is really worth visiting. You can spend a lot of time there. The website, I'll quote, describes EJI's mission as being committed to ending mass incarceration and excessive punishment in the United States, to challenging racial and economic injustice, and to protecting basic human rights for the most vulnerable people in American society. Its activism is nonviolent, national, and importantly for the purposes of this presentation, it's local in scope. And what I'll be saying, of course, is only my own perspective based on my own lived experience, largely, I think. EJI, which is our the Community Remembrance Project of Boone County's sort of umbrella organization, believes that, and this is my paraphrase, people in this society who at the very least benefit from having money, education, property, political power, connections, and crucially of European descent, that is white people in general. Those people often, and definitely in my own case, are so thoroughly immersed in our capitalistic, patriarchal / gendered and violence-based society. Those people, we white people, often and maybe usually are almost never consciously aware of the social truth about ourselves. You know, and I think this is not an original or unfamiliar idea to many of you, but it's an important part of my story, which is the lens through which I'm going to approach this topic. On the EJI website, you can read a quotation, "The power of history is in telling the truth." And so I will be trying to tell the truth about my own discovery of myself, really, in regard to my social location as a privileged white male in 20th and 21st century United States. The author Bell Hooks says, acknowledging the truth of our reality, both individual and collective, is a necessary stage for personal and political growth. That has been very true in my own personal experience, and I think it is really a great part of the mission of EJI to create awareness of what has really happened in the history of this country, and I think people who lack privilege, many of the privileges that you know, the dominating culture has, they have, because of their own experience, a different understanding of the reality of our society. And so I think, you know, in what I'm saying here is sort of inevitably addressed to people like me, to white people. So, excuse me, it's, you know, it's a little unbalanced perhaps in that respect. So as was said in my brief biography, excuse me, I was born and grew to my teenage years in Omaha. I'm the oldest of 3 sisters, the only son of a happily married, middle-class, post-World War II couple family, which was enmeshed really in the privileged society of that era for people like us anyway. However, as you know, in 1962, my father's company transferred him to Little Rock, Arkansas, which was the cause of quite a significant change in my life. There I was, I was in last year of middle school and early high school, first years of high school there, very much out of my element, without friends at first, of course. And for the first time, I was faced with really wanting to belong. Even though I discovered that belonging required me in Little Rock to navigate some uncomfortable situations, which I'd never been faced with before. Not because my family was, knew the truth of what the social reality, our social reality was, but because there were very few occasions which interrupted our understanding of that. I well remember when I was old enough to be, riding my bike to a local shopping center and, with my friends and, hanging around there unsupervised for, several hours after school or on weekends. And at one point when that was just beginning, my father had a talk with me, and that was, if you're ever anywhere where you feel in trouble, find a policeman. He'll help you, and I accepted that as absolute truth, and it was comforting to me, and I never had to do that, but I've always remembered that, especially now that we learn about the different kind of talk that African American parents and their children have to have. In school, I was quickly called a Yankee and other racially offensive names, but because I was white, I think, it was it was a strange sort of good-natured way, that it was obvious to my peers in school that as a Northerner, I just didn't understand the way things were really. My high school was a newer suburban high school, 1,500 students, 7 of whom were Black only. And as soon as I got there, 1962, 5 years after the Little Rock Central High School integration crisis, which was the term that for that period that many of my teachers used, and of course I'd been old enough to watch the coverage of that event on TV, and my parents were upset about it, very much so. And, they were staunch Republicans. And when President Eisenhower nationalized the Arkansas National Guard, it was a good thing, our family thought. And it was very easy, still living in Omaha, to feel, to feel angry a little at those people who were, not who did not want their school to be integrated, and I remember today, I think, but of course I've seen pictures of it, of white students and their families shouting and surrounding the Black students who were being ushered into Central High School by troops, and it was a horrifying memory. So when my father announced to our family that he was being transferred to Little Rock and we were going to move, the first thing first thing I thought of was, wait a minute, how can we do that? How can we go into that kind of environment? And my mother sweetly, but, very naively saying, well, maybe we can help those white people understand a little, it was, I understand that completely, but it was, we were very unconscious of the system we were swimming in, and which was benefiting us. And it was also comforting to be able to locate the source of the problem as other people, whom based on our, loving and just example, would, would be impressed and maybe converted in a sense by our presence. And that was not at all what we experienced. I realize I was very complicit because I wanted to be accepted so much by this, by the only friends I had who thought very differently, I thought, than I did. So I was, very quiet about my uncomfortableness. I did not engage in the frequent microaggressions we can say today, to the few Black students. I try to be friendly to them, but not in a way that would arouse questioning among my other white peers. But it was hard for me, because I just felt I couldn't be honest. And so I was, didn't do anything at all to alleviate that situation. So my solution was to escape from Arkansas when I went to college, and discovered a group of people that felt very differently, but most of whom were just as privileged as I was. The student body was largely white. At that time, it was male only. So that was a new thing to me, which also had kind of an effect on me. I'd never gone to school away from women. So, yeah. But anyway, I found a pretty large group of students there in my college who were, I guess I describe it as progressive, anti-Vietnam War. This was in the late 60s, early 70s, so the war was going on full blast at the time. Don't trust anyone over 30. We believed we, knew better. Anti-corporation, it was kind of a subculture, in which I felt more or less accepted. But I was very aware of the big world out there, which was, love it or leave it, kind of, so I still, I felt kind of rather alienated in my own country. During the summers, I would go home, usually to Little Rock, and one summer, I think it was the summer after my sophomore year, I think, one of my best friends, one of my best friends owned a road machinery company. And my friend said, hey, you want a summer job, work with us? And so I thought, well, yeah, great. So I was put in the parts and shipping department. And it was interesting. My coworkers were white young men, late 20s at the oldest, I think, married to high school sweethearts, I think, kind of. No possibility or no desire for higher education beyond high school. You know, there was a water fountain off the shipping floor, which was available to all of us. Actually, two water fountains. One had colored written over it, and it was not cleaned very often. The other had, cold water. And, it didn't say whites only, but there was everybody knew there who the fountains were for. And and what for me was a strong act of rebellion, decided to drink out of the colored fountain, which I did for quite a while, I think, until one of my white coworkers said, "Hey, Red." They called me Red because my hair was not like it is today. That's that's for Black people, although that wasn't the term he used. And so then I thought, well, okay, they've let me get by with this because they thought I was just ignorant, but now I better not do that. So occasionally when nobody was looking, I still drank out of the colored fountain, but and one of the other employees was a elderly man. I guess not. He must have been in his 50s, probably. A Black man who was the janitor. Had worked there for a long time. His name was Robert. I always tried to be friendly with him, and he was with me. He was the butt of frequent teasing, which sometimes took the form of things like tripping him as he went along and fell. But his reaction was, a couple of times it was, he wasn't hit or anything, but if he fell, he was kind of hurt, but he would always laugh after that, oh my gosh, like it was somehow his fault, which pained me no end. But I didn't know what to do. All the white people were standing around. This is a character defect that I have always had, afraid to speak out. But one day he announced that he was leaving. Robert was leaving. He was taking his family to Chicago and moving away. And so nobody said much about that. But on his last day, we sort of gathered around to say goodbye to him. And I wanted to say something to him. So I guess we were me and the other white guys were kind of standing in a circle around him and, trying to say words of farewell, I guess. And I said, "Robert, I want to wish you luck." And he looked at me and said, "Really?" But then to my great shame, I said, "Yes, really, because you're going to need it." And so I felt, I had to soften my, my wish to him to, not let my fellow white folks, realize that I was kind of, breaking the code by honestly wishing him some luck. And I never saw him again. Never had any opportunity. Although for the rest of that day, I thought, gee, if I can find him alone, I can speak to him, But, I carried that with me for I still do, a very long time. And I didn't think of it in these terms until later, in some ways much later. But that made me realize, I was absolutely committed to the white supremacist attitude of Little Rock, Arkansas. I didn't want to be an outsider. I wanted to be, I was one of them. And that it really had an effect on me when I was able to process it later. When I began to think about the nature of the society we live in, and what a struggle it was for me, and most people perhaps don't have the same character defects that I had and do, but it's we are so comfortable, I think, many of us, me certainly, so comfortable in the society in which we're raised. And if it's working for us, we don't have any reason to question it. If we see things on TV or the media like the trouble in Little Rock in 1957, we're horrified by it, but what can we do? I mean, that's what, yeah, other than, my father became more vocal among the very rather conservative members of the church we belong to. So in Sunday school classes, adult Sunday school classes, he'd talk about, things that were said and what he replied. But, I don't know, we didn't, our family didn't attend any protests or anything like that. I don't know. It's just kind of ashamed of it still. But let me fast forward quite a few years to Columbia, Missouri. I was about in late 2019. I was a member of a book club, which was focused on reading books about racism. And one book in particular, which we happened to read, was an account of mainstream denominations, which we would like to assume were sort of the location of the conscience of society during the civil rights movement years. Which actually all of the mainstream denominations went on record as, opposing opposition to civil rights and racism, either went on record with plans and commitments about how to fund and support anti-racism efforts, and how every one of them failed to meet their own commitments, the timelines of their own commitments, for various reasons, which they probably thought were, valid, financial, often, I think, largely. I don't know. Or if they did not make any commitments, almost more damning, they just ignored it. Didn't mention the problem, really. So that, the consensus of this book club group I was a part of, was that, boy, we want to keep meeting because we've, valued and learned from this book club discussions, but maybe it's time for, not just more learning, but some actual work, some actual activism. So, we decided to do something. And at that time I was retired. My wife and I don't have any kids, so I had relatively more free time than some of the other members of the group. So I said, well, I'll look around and see what's, available out there that, we could, take on. And so, after a very brief bit of scrolling, I discovered the EJI website and contacted them. And they, you know, uh, had a program or had a strategy of anyone contacting them and expressing interest. They offered to give the contact information of people who in your state or county especially, people who had also expressed interest if you might want to get together. So, I said, wow, yeah. And, I was sent 5 names and contact information. And I sent an email saying, gee, we'd like to start a group or somehow become active in the area of anti-racism. A few people answered. One of them turned out to be a woman who was a founding member already of something called the Community Remembrance Project of Missouri. And man, I was, had no idea living in my curtain of privilege. I didn't know anything about EJI and certainly didn't know about this group. But contacted her and she, became our champion and guide in the process of forming a community remembrance project. How's my time? By the way, I don't want to have to stop in the middle. So, okay. Oh, okay. Well, all right. I won't, that doesn't mean I'm going to go on for a much longer time, but, so, EJI, has a lot of information and a process for local groups that want to form. And one of the kind of requirements is to really, it asks members to examine their own social positions and realize their privilege or lack of it. Of course, EJI recommends that groups be as diverse as possible. We had and have more white members than African American members, but at this time it's pretty close. Some people have moved away, and also a very important point is EJI asks each group to create a coalition agreement, which lists the values and opinions and goals of each local group. One of their recommendations is to center the experience and thoughts of people of color rather than the experience of white society in all their efforts, and that has really been an eye-opening approach for me. To realize how easy it is for me to, see the next appropriate step and recommend it, and support it. without asking people who have a very different, allowing people who have a very different experience of life uh, to make those suggestions and to, describe that experience. So we've really tried to do that. And we had EJI has staff who are called project managers who also help guide, um, forming community rooms projects, CRPs who are in formation to guide them through the process. And we had some really rough spots, but we, were counseled every step of the way by the woman who was a member of the Community Remembrance Project of Missouri, and also by an EJI project manager who was assigned to our group. And we have, we ended up, one of our members was also a member of a group at MU called the Association of Black Graduate and Professional Students, who had commissioned a marker for the lynching of James Scott, which occurred in 1923 in Columbia, Boone County. His marker is on the MKT Trail just at the intersection of Stewart and Providence. He was lynched from the old Stewart Road Bridge in 1923. Was a father, a loyal member of Second Baptist Church, an employee of the University of Missouri Medical School. He was a janitor there, very respected, apparently. Unjustly, now we realize accused of assaulting a white girl, and he was lynched there. So what we did upon becoming members of the EJI affirming Community Remembrance Project of Boone County, we rededicated that marker, the existing marker, but we preceded it by a soil collection ceremony, which EGI recommends as a way to really, make material the occurrence of lynching by collecting soil from the site of the lynching, and we've sent that soil to a memorial cabinet located in the Boone County Government Center, and another identical jar to the Black Archives of Mid-Missouri in Kansas City, who has a museum display of jars from all over Missouri collected in the same manner, and then a third identical jar to the EJI Memorial Museum in Montgomery, Alabama, where it is today. There's one other documented lynching in Boone County, which occurred in 1889. George Bush, a 17 or 18-year-old Black man, was accused of disturbing a young white girl on the farm, or probably farm, not really a plantation, where her mother worked. He was arrested and put in the Boone County Jail, kidnapped from there, and hung from a second-story window of the then Boone County Courthouse, which in the columns, which are in front of the second Boone County Courthouse, were, that young man was hung between those between a couple of those columns, so it's still a very, a live, a tangible reminder of that incident. We also had a soil collection ceremony on the grounds of the courthouse for that event, and the 3 jars are all now in the Boone County Government Center, the museum in Kansas City, and an EJI in Montgomery. And to kind of close that event out, we had a community education event in the chambers of the Boone County Commission, which is appropriate but ironic since it was on that location virtually where Mr. Bush was hung. And that was that educational event concerned racially restrictive covenants here in Boone County based on research of deeds in the Boone County Recorder's Office, that prohibited lots being sold in certain areas of Columbia to anyone who was not white, and in some cases, in one case at least, to anyone who was not Jewish or who was Jewish. So the privilege and racism is still prevalent in our society, as is obvious to many people anyway. And I'm especially privileged. I feel especially blessed to be part of a group of people with whom I feel a great deal of brother and sisterhood. It's one of my big takeaways from this long experience is the importance of community, for all of us, especially people like me who haven't been able always to do what I think we should do, but find it much easier with support of like-minded people, to help us along the way. So anyway, that's my take, I hope, on why we have a community remembrance project of Boone County here today. That's all I've got. Thank you very much. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
We have some questions on the chat. Let me see. These are mostly comments. I don't see any questions per se here.
Marie has her hand up.
Yeah, Marie.
Yeah, thank you, Brad, for sharing this information. I'm just curious, are there, we had 2 lynchings in Boone County, and you've kind of completed the work on commemorating those. Are there other events or people that you're working on commemorating at this point?
Thank you, Marie. Yes, there are. There is a list that I think that people have gathered that contains 11 names of people in Boone County. The difficulty for us is when EJI was getting started, because of the volume of lynchings, several thousand throughout the country, they decided that their focus would have to be from the years 1877, which was the end of the occupation of federal troops in the South, and thus the real beginning of the Jim Crow area. So from 1877 to 1950, and And they did extensive research and documented, I don't know how many, but several thousand lynchings during that time period. And because of their resources, at first, they had to limit the support of local CRPs to lynchings that were documented within that era. You know, one huge benefit is that if CRPs will memorialize a lynching, EJI fabricates and ships the markers free of charge. So that's that's a huge benefit. But also I think, it's not, we would not be surprised if some lynching memorials might be opposed by certain groups in a society. So if there's not absolutely rock solid documentation available, that if we don't have that, or if the CRPs don't have that, then it's for people who don't want to believe that the United States is a racist society, that's an opening. So EJI is working to broaden those years, the research in those years. But we've just in the short time, from late 2019 to the present, we have seen their response time for help really diminish because of the demands of local groups trying to start CRPs. There are about 5 in Missouri, I think now, active or forming, and so their capacity currently is just not able to promptly meet the demands of the local groups, although they do, but it's just taking a longer time, and I think their resources are stretched more. Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention, I'm reading a book that I would highly recommend called The Warmth of Other Suns by Isabel Wilkerson.
Oh.
And it's about the Great Migration from the South to the North. And as part of the background material, she shares the figure that it's estimated that for 40 years, between 1889 and 1929, an African-American person was either hanged or burned alive every 4 days during that period. So that just, supplements what you're saying about the magnitude of what happened.
Kathy Jensen asked, was Omaha integrated when you went to school there?
It was, but now there are EJI groups have documented a couple of other lynchings in Omaha right now. I say it was just beginning to be not by law, but by residents. The African American community was, and I guess still is, in living in segregated areas. So my youngest sister, who's 14 years younger than I am, was bused, in some of her high school years to other schools, and that wasn't the common strategy all over the United States. It was usually Black students who were bused to white schools, but so it was, integration was ongoing, but incomplete, to answer your question, I think.
Sue?
I have just a quick question. You made reference to 11. Are you suggesting that there were, you didn't finish out saying what the 11 were? Were the 11 other, you have brief information saying that those were also additional lynchings in the county?
Yeah, well, a total of 11. So that would probably include the 2 that are documented by EJI. Several people have mentioned to me that they have documentation of other lynchings in Boone County, but we just haven't had time to investigate them. We're kind of at a pause. Our group is at this point. But we will be ongoing, I think, and invest and locating and collecting those other lynching stories, and hopefully, getting them researched is part of our future progress. Winifred, I don't know if I'm the person who should call for questions, but I think you're muted though, by the way.
When we can't hear you.
Yep, got it. Thank you. I was just concerned that the focus on lynching makes us say, oh, we don't do that anymore, so we don't have anything to worry about. I'm concerned that it minimizes the ongoing racism we see in our community now, that I'm sure Black people feel. And I guess I just want to know what you can do about that, or what you think should be done.
Well, I think you're absolutely right. I think, the rate at which Black people are killed by police and the situations, that's an extrajudicial killing, which is exactly what lynching is. That's certainly an ongoing problem. And what prevents me, and I think the other members of our local CRP, and I assume of other CRPs, from feeling that the situation is over, is because I'm more and more conscious of the privilege that I, as a white person, continue to have today, to the disadvantagement of people who are not white. I mean, I think the situation can never be considered over until, all people have an equal value in Wiley Miller, whom you all know, who's one of our crucial members, often says, that the diminishment, the neglect, as well as the hate and violence that Black people, Indigenous people, people of color are visited with today, compared to the comfortable, at the very least, lives that people like me live, is a glaring wound in society. If I have cancer, but I don't know it, it may be too late for me to get treatment when I discover it. Well, I think racism is the same way. If I say, hey, my family never owned slaves. I have lots of Black friends. I'm not aware of, what is indicated by my privilege, and that is that, I'm benefiting from a racist system. That's the kind of consciousness, I think, that people who go through the CRP creation process, inevitably get. And I think that's what all of our society as a whole needs to,
Right.
to have that same sort of sensitivity or consciousness.
Okay. Last question from Carl or Marie. Carl, you're muted.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate the presentation. Just a couple of days ago, I was attending a class with Larry Brown, and he about Woody Guthrie, the great fascist or anti-fascist, I should say. And his of course his father was kind of a member of the KKK. He was named after Woodrow Wilson. It's enough said.
Oh,
But in his hometown, as a backgrounder, there was a picture that Larry showed of a bridge with two black folks, a mother and her son, hanging from the bottom of that bridge that was sent out as a postcard in Woody's youth. But given the assault these days on DEI with some of the folks, what do you think about that? I mean, in this modern era, and of course, my story is similar to yours as a white person growing up in Chicago and privilege, and my parents were racist and so on. But what do you think about the assault on DEI now?
Oh, it's obviously a backlash. People don't want to be uncomfortable. They don't want to face the reality. At the very least. And if history as the quote from EJI's website, if history is about truth telling, then it's got to be the whole truth. And this. I'll say my process of growth has been very uncomfortable for me, but boy, do I deeply feel better anyway than I used to. The blessing of knowing and accepting the truth. It's a greater benefit for me than I ever realized before. Before I came to this. I think we're the sheltering that we all we all are so that we value so much is a lie, and sooner or later it becomes for many people, I think, impossible to live with that, really. I don't know, that's my maybe my Pollyanna version of
Brad, really thank you for your talk. I think we all learned some stuff this afternoon, and thanks for sharing with us.
Happy to be here. Happy. Thank you. Thank you for the invitation.
And so it is time to move on to our regular meeting. And
I'll sign off, I guess.
you can stay if you want.